This video is brought to you by Devout Decals, makers of reusable Catholic art for your home altar, your bedroom, and your home classroom.
When covering the attempts by Rome to suppress the traditional Mass and the seemingly endless rumors about that happening, you'll often see a lot of people suggest some really odd things. I've actually seen people suggest that laity should take the authorities in the church, the bishops and cardinals most responsible for this stuff, to court to protect their masses and to protect the traditional Mass. And they make some really creative arguments for it. Most of the time, it's not hard to see, though, that the secular courts would do what they've always done whenever faced with internal church disputes, which is, unless there's some sort of Ted McCarrick kind of thing going on or something that obviously touches on the criminal code, the secular courts will say, this is not our concern, we don't touch internal church matters, at least in the United States. In other countries, we've seen the courts in, say, France and other places interact with and intervene themselves directly into internal church disputes. That doesn't always go well either, but that is allowed in those countries because of the different relationship the church has with the secular authorities. But one lay group has decided that they're going to take a slightly different but similar approach. They are going to challenge Traditionis Custodes and the suppression of their particular Latin Mass parish by taking the authors of the documents involved to the apostolic courts in Rome, to essentially the church's supreme court. This is unlikely to have any kind of good outcome for them. In fact, I would be shocked if they weren't laughed out of the room. But that is what we're likely to see, as you're going to see in this story. Pray for everybody involved, and perhaps my cynicism on this will be misplaced. Perhaps they'll be victorious. Kind of doubt it, but let's take a look at the story. Headline from Info Catholica: Parishioners of St. Louis appeal the cancellation of the Tridentine Mass and the closure of the parish before the Vatican High Court. Despite being a growing and fervent community, Archbishop Mitchell Rosansky decided to close the church as part of a staff reduction plan. The faithful have appealed to the Supreme Tribunal of the Apostolic Signatura, arguing that the closure goes against canon law. To be clear, I am not advocating for this method. I actually think that trying to resist the closure of your parishes, if you use this method, might actually work against everything we're doing. It's the bar for attempting to essentially sue bishops and cardinals and maybe the Pope himself using the church's internal court system is very high, especially for laity. It should be only done under the most extraordinary circumstances. Now, your parish being taken from you, your traditional Latin Mass being taken from you, those are extraordinary times and extraordinary circumstances. As you're going to see here, they're making an argument that many of you will agree with. There's zero chance Rome's going to agree with this argument. Their argument basically comes down to that they are not being spiritually fed at the new Mass. How do you think that's going to go over in a post-conciliar Rome? Let's go to the article. Quote, Parishioners of the Archdiocese of St. Louis have appealed to the Vatican's highest canon law court to stop the Archbishop's closure of a parish with a thriving Latin Mass community. St. Barnabas in O'Fallon, Missouri, just outside the metropolis of St. Louis, was a thriving parish offering exclusively the traditional Latin Mass when it was closed last year by decree of Archbishop Mitchell Rosansky. Despite being debt-free and boasting a, quote, vital and growing community by the Vatican's own admission, the parish was condemned to closure along with 33 others in the archdiocese as part of a severe downsizing project dubbed All New. These closures prompted several calls for the Vatican to keep several churches open. However, the closure of St. Barnabas last year has been a particularly hard blow for its parishioners, who now have to travel to traditional oratories 40 minutes away from their former parish to attend the Mass of the Lord. Some of these parishioners have stopped attending the TLM because of travel difficulties, such as the mother of one parishioner, Susan Cook, aged 89. Jason Bolt, a former St. Barnabas parishioner who is leading efforts to appeal the closure decision to the Vatican, told LifeSite News that depriving Catholics of the traditional Latin Mass is, quote, like taking away our food. The focus of canon law is the salvation of souls, Bolt said, noting that to promote this end, the Catholic Church spiritually feeds its flock, quote, in the way they need to be fed. Therefore, suppressing the TLM amounts to, quote, starving Catholic souls. We can't eat anymore. So now you are starving us and depriving us of what we need to be able to move forward in our faith and in our relationship with God, Bolt said. He explained that after Archbishop Rosansky denied the parishioners' initial appeal against the closure of St. Barnabas, they turned to the Vatican's dicastery for the clergy. However, in June, they learned that the dicastery had also rejected their appeal. According to the Vatican body's decision, a copy of which has been seen by LifeSite News, according to Pope Francis' Motu Proprio Traditionis Custodes, which suppresses the TLM, quote, the continuation of the celebration of the 1962 Missal in a parish church was not permitted. Therefore, to comply with this, quote, higher standard, the traditional Mass at St. Barnaby would have to be suppressed, regardless of whether it was instinctively merged with another parish or not. Furthermore, although the dicastery agreed that St. Barnabas was a viable and growing parish, the Vatican body considered this to be irrelevant to the considerations justified its continued operation, since, quote, the growth of the parish was due almost entirely to the celebration of the 1962 Missal, end quote. In other words, the Roman authority said, no, this is all part of the plan, because it is. Their goal is to suppress the traditional Latin Mass. Yes, those rumors that they were going to impose a new document in this past summer turned out not to come to pass. Depending on what source you believe on that, it's because Francis was not sold on the need to do it, and he was being lobbied from both sides on how to do it, and quite possibly the people most interested in suppressing it, that the Latin Mass, were far too enthusiastic about it for his tastes, and he tends not to like people like that, a lot of them being self-interested career ladder climbers within the Roman Curia, and to his credit, he does not like people like that in the Roman hierarchy. But the goal is to suppress the Latin Mass eventually. And so this argument actually doesn't make the argument for the position, like the traditionalist position, in a good way, because what it actually does is it feeds into their perception that the traditionalists are schismatic. For a schism with the ape of the church, I don't care personally, but the idea that they have in their head, that Rome has, is that those who are dedicated to the traditional Mass are in schism, essentially, in virtual schism, and need to be educated on how wonderful the new Mass is. They've said this in their accompanying documents, the Traditionis Custodes. And for most parishioners, a 40-minute drive to those oratories isn't that bad. My family drives 90 miles to get to Mass on Sunday. I'd love 40 minutes away. That'd be great. But the argument itself is troublesome strategically. We can point to all the places, using all the statistics we want, that many of the typical pew-sitting Catholics don't believe what the church teaches, statistically. We can't say that about any particular person, probably, but you can look at the statistics. They support the Moloch ritual, what we have to call that here, the sacrifice of the most vulnerable to Moloch using medical means. They tend to support the secular thinking on not having a whole lot of kids. They tend to support all sorts of ideas counter to Catholic morality. And frankly, most of them don't believe in the real presence either, if the statistics rather consistently show that. But to say that the new Mass doesn't feed you, that's a step way too far for Rome. You are not going to have a sympathetic audience to that, even in the Apostolic Signatura. And so we wait to see what happens, but I expect the Apostolic Signatura to say, no, Traditionis Custodes is perfectly legal. Your parish being taken away for downsizing is perfectly within the purview of your bishop, and you need to submit to him. And at that point, what will those behind this do? Will they drive the 40 minutes to an oratory? Or will they find a more secure home in an SSPX chapel in their area? I'm curious what they will do. And also, quite frankly, the 89-year-old woman should be offered a ride by somebody who is making the drive to the oratory where you can get the Mass 40 minutes away. They should be offering her a ride. I'm a little disappointed that they don't appear to be. I'm curious what you think about this, so let me know in the comments. Do you think that they should at least try, even if it means Francis, Fernandez, and Roche have more evidence to use against traditionalists, that we are all just schismatics who need to be pushed to the sides and away, kept far away from the rest of Catholics and re-educated on how wonderful the post-conciliar order of things is? Or do you think that this is an imprudent kind of way of approaching this question? Let me know in the comments, please. Like and subscribe if you haven't. It does help. So does sharing this on social media. That helps too. And as always, pray for the church. I'm Anthony Stine. Ave Maria.